All right, welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're going to unpack something truly fascinating. When we think of horror, our minds usually go straight to those massive cinematic events, right? We think of giant monsters, cheap jump scares, or those huge elaborate haunted houses. But today, we're actually setting the stage to deconstruct something far more potent. We're looking at echoes and glances, the anatomy of micro-horror. We're going to look really closely at two very brief script excerpts, and I'll show you exactly how these sources use incredibly minimalistic details to create this massive, almost suffocating tension. It's all about doing a whole lot with a very little, and honestly, the mechanics behind it are just brilliant. So get comfortable, and let's unravel how atmospheric storytelling actually works.
Right off the bat, I want to drop you directly into the environment of our first source, Echoes from the Blue Glow, 2:13 a.m. Now, this isn't just a time on a clock, it's a psychological setting. Think about that universal experience of being awake at this specific, super late night hour. The rest of the world is completely asleep. All the ambient noise of the city or your neighborhood, it's just totally vanished. By anchoring the scene at 2:13 a.m., the text instantly builds this oppressive atmosphere of isolation before a single thing even happens. It literally primes our brains for vulnerability. You're alone, it's dark, and the normal, safe rules of the daytime world, they just don't apply anymore.
Okay, moving on to Section 1, Anatomy of a Scene, Building Dread. Let's dive right into this.
To really understand how this dread is crafted from the ground up, we need to break down the specific environmental choices the writer makes here. First up, the setting. We've got a dark bedroom, and it's explicitly described in the source as messy and shadowy. And listen, a messy room isn't just set dressing for the sake of it. It creates visual noise in the shadows. It creates these ambiguous shapes where your mind can easily start imagining things lurking in the corners. Next up is the light source, just the phone's blue glow. It's this cold, clinical, highly unnatural light that casts really harsh shadows. It focuses all of our character Allie's attention, and by extension our attention, onto this one tiny glowing rectangle. And finally, the inciting incident, a voice message from someone named Hamza. These stark elements just work together so perfectly. The shadowy room isolates Allie physically, that harsh blue glow isolates him visually, and the impending voice message, well, that's about to isolate him psychologically.
Which brings us to Section 2, Terror in the Blue Glow. Let's talk about digital anxiety. We really need to shift our focus to the digital medium itself for a second, because this source just perfectly captures a very modern type of anxiety. Hamza, voice message. The source notes that this pops up with a tense, eerie silence, and it carries this really ominous tone. But ask yourself, why does this totally normal, everyday digital interaction feel so inherently terrifying in this specific context? Well, in an otherwise completely silent, isolated room, modern tech suddenly acts as a terrifying conduit. It's basically a portal to the outside world that you're holding right in your hands, and you have absolutely zero control over what comes through it. If this happened at, say, 2:13 p.m. in a busy, loud coffee shop, it's just a buddy reaching out, no big deal. But at 2:13 a.m., in the cold blue light of a shadowy room, a voice message demands to be heard. It requires you to shatter the safety of that silence. It's the pure anticipation of the unknown delivered straight to your screen. The real tension is entirely in the waiting.
So the really crucial point here is how Allie actually reacts to this, and the script brilliantly layers it out for us. He whispers in fear. He's clearly confused and anxious. We get this tight close-up of his shocked face. And this is my favorite part. His eyes are reflecting the screen. I mean, this is an absolute masterclass in visual storytelling. By showing Allie's eyes reflecting that blue glow, the screen actually acts as a mirror for the audience's own rising anxiety. We aren't just passively looking at Allie, we're looking at a reflection of the very source of his fear. We can feel how captive he is to that little device. His physical reactions, the whispering, the sheer shock, they tell us that whatever this notification implies, something is profoundly wrong.
So, let's jump to our final thematic section, Section 3, The Power of the Unspoken, Implied Tension.
To really get a grip on implied tension, let's look back at that environment we talked about. The source describes a subtle shadow distortion in the room, just hinting at something unseen. And what's really fascinating here is the physical manifestation of fear in Allie's room. It manages to be terrifying without ever actually giving the game away. It hints at a threat rather than taking the easy way out with a cheap jump scare. Because a shadow distorting subtly in a messy, dark room, that is deeply unsettling, mostly because it forces your imagination to do all the heavy lifting. Your mind desperately tries to fill in the blanks, and trust me, what our minds can conjure up is almost always scarier than any monster explicitly shown on a screen. The horror is entirely in the hint.
Now let's actually bridge our two sources together, because this whole concept of the unspoken, it completely transcends the setting. On the left side here, we have the modern horror we've been unpacking, all these isolated dread, those distorting shadows, the lonely blue glow of the phone. But compare that to our second source on the right, which taps into this incredibly primal folk horror element. The text simply reads, "When Ion asked why, the villagers exchanged frightened glances." That is just incredibly powerful. Just like Ollie's dread is built on a subtle shadow, the tension here is built entirely on a silent reaction. Ion asks a super simple question, why? And instead of getting an answer, he receives only terrified silence in the frightened glances of this collective group. It communicates so clearly that the truth is just too terrifying to even speak aloud. It's brilliant because it contrasts the modern, solitary fear of a glowing smartphone screen with this ancient, communal fear of a shared dark secret. But at their core, both rely entirely on the unspoken to terrify us.
Which brings us to the absolute core takeaway of this entire explainer: micro-horror. So what is it? It is the crafting of profound suspense and atmospheric dread through sparse details, lighting cues, and unspoken human reactions. Both of our sources encapsulate this perfectly. Whether it's the digital anxiety of a 2:13 a.m. text message lighting up a shadowy room, or the heavy, unspoken glances of villagers keeping some terrible secret, the dread is built in the negative space. It's built in what isn't said, what isn't clearly seen, and what is just left lingering in those quiet moments.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with the exact questions that give these texts their incredible power. What was in Hamza's voice message? And what exactly do those villagers know? You see, the really brilliant thing about micro-horror is that it doesn't owe us the answers. The true terror lives in the lingering unknown. It just leaves us to wander in the dark, imagining the absolute worst. I really hope this deep dive has made you hungry to explore more mechanics of atmospheric storytelling. And hey, the next time your phone lights up with a notification in the dead of night, I bet you'll remember exactly how much power a simple blue glow can hold. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep questioning the shadows.